Good afternoon to those in the room. My name is Julius, and I'll be your host this afternoon. I'm from Stedman Global Consulting. Growing up, I watched a series on TV called Prison Break, and just before the next episode, they would say previously on Prison Break. And so previously we were here, not in this room, but we were joined by people like you, and we were discussing building strength at the top and mastering corporate governance for SMEs. It was funded by FSDU. I don't know if we have representatives here today from FSDU, financial sector depending Uganda. Okay, they're not yet here. But they financed that, sponsored that event, and we're glad that you were able, some of you were able to join in online and in the room. This afternoon, we are discussing building a dynamic board culture with tone at the top, mood in the middle, and fervor at the bottom. Yeah, we have very, very distinguished leaders in the corporate governance space that will be sharing with us their experience and wisdom this afternoon. BRMC is the brainchild of 4 founding members, first of whom is JKC, Japheth Kato Consult, who are experts in corporate governance, Legal Mark Advocates, who are corporate law firm specializing in financial matters, Stedman Global Consulting, who are management and development consultants, and Fervour, who are environment management experts. These 4 people, their leadership came together and thought it would be a good thing to engage leaders in the corporate governance space, and hence 7 events later, we are here today. I want to thank all of you for making time to join us online and physically in the room. The BRMC is not a schoolroom, it's not a classroom, but you will get to learn. It's not a networking social event, but you'll get to network. In 2001, the Twin Towers in the US, in New York, is it New York? Yeah. They were bombed, the World Trade Center. And George W. Bush, who was the president at the time, was in an elementary school somewhere, and he got a call, and he was whisked to the White House, to what they call the Situation Room. In this room, he was briefed by the FBI and all intelligence bodies of the US. He was given the latest information so that he could make a critical decision on what America should do, how they should respond. So BRMC is a situation room where peers come to share their experiences and find solutions for emerging issues in the corporate governance landscape. Yeah. So it's a situation room where you come and you brainstorm and find solutions to implement in the organizations where you work. Yeah. So welcome to the situation room. Our host is Jackie Namara. Enjoy the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julius. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and warm welcome to our community, which is online. The last time we checked online, I think we are sitting at 145 participants, which is fantastic, and I hope we can get more and more people signing up. As Julius has said, the topic of conversation today is about boardroom culture. Tone at the top. I want to see if you remember. I know it's not a classroom. What is in the middle? Mood in the middle and fervor at the bottom. So I'm really privileged today to have a distinguished panelist with us. We have Rachel Dumba, who represents one of the founding members of the Boardroom Masterclass I'm mixing them up. From Stedman Global. You're most welcome, Rachel.
Thank you.
Guys, show some love. And then we have Japheth Kato from JKC. I'm sure he's a very familiar face for those of you who've interacted in the corporate governance space.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And
especially with the gender balance here, I am really privileged. Sitting between 2 Namagunga, and there's Gayaza there. So thank you.
Okay, and then we have Candy Wekesa Okoboy from Stanbic Bank. You're almost welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
For our online attendees, please tell us where you're from, what maybe your role is. I would like to get to know you a little bit better. So in preparation for this particular session, we're doing a bit of reading, and I came across an article, I think it's by PwC, about the 4 biases in boardroom culture. And they were saying that if we were to go by Greek mythology, the typical scenario is that in a boardroom, you have all these very intelligent, experienced people who are coming to contribute at the best of their abilities. And hopefully the intent is that they are helping and they are contributing in the best interest of the organization that they have been asked to serve on. And in an ideal situation, there should be a healthy board culture. It's like one big happy family. But we know that that's not true in real life. The reality is that we have some very interesting things happening in the boardroom, and not just in Uganda, across the world. And if you've been looking at the headlines in the last couple of months, we've been seeing some really things that read like they're coming out of a movie set. But these are happening in boardrooms. And we hope that this afternoon we'll be able to unpack some of the things that happen. What can we do to address some of the issues and the challenges? And we shall also be inviting you both online and in the room to contribute. We'll try and keep taking some bit of a break to allow for that engagement. So please prepare your comments and your questions accordingly. For our community online, please use the Q&A section for your questions so that we can have them in one place. But if you put them in the chat, it's okay, but having them in the Q&A helps us to be able to collate them and then deal with them a lot easier. So Japheth, since this time you are the only gentleman with us on the stage, we shall do gentlemen first. And let's get started. This is more like an icebreaker question, so no need to sweat any bullets. So what's the one small intentional action that you take daily that strengthens the culture with the people around you? And could that personal approach translate to the boardroom? In your experience, what is boardroom culture, and why is tone at the top so vital?
Thank you very much, Jackie. I think let me start with the boardroom, which is at my home. What is that thing that we do? And has become, because the culture can be, is dynamic. Culture is the things you do every day, and you do them over and over again. So one thing we do is we pray together. When we are praying, there's no hierarchy, there's no board chairman, there's no chair of audit committee, there's no lead director. And we eat the same food. Now, I may be touching on sensitive nerves here. There are some people who have got diversity in terms of food, what others eat, and what thou shalt not eat, and when you eat it, so it's like you are different. So we do that. And then the other thing, and I was thinking about this, is that I actually communicate to the people at home where I'm going to be in that particular time. I say, so today I'm going to be in this place, then I'll be here, next week I will travel here. So what am I trying to do through that communication and so on? Create an element of trust. Of course, I don't tell them how big my bank overdraft is, but I communicate. And what I've found, that has created a team and therefore trust. So you get then the feedback from the team. They also start opening up to you and letting you know what their issues are. So I think if that goes to the boardroom, that you are communicating, you are creating trust and honesty and so on, that can be transferred to a boardroom, and you have a good culture of trust, because it is all the board. It is all about having the team, and the team that does work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Japheth. Candy, what do you think keeps the culture of your inner circle alive and thriving? And how can this role be reflected in the boardroom, especially in how senior and middle management experience the organization? And does the board's tone really have that influence for that mood in the middle that we talk about? And perhaps while you're there, also tell us, boardroom culture is one thing, but how does that differ from organizational culture?
It's a loaded question, but there are a couple of things that I have done, and I think all of us can do, to ensure that we, as much as possible, influence the culture of our inner circle. And I think the first thing which the chairman alluded to is modeling. You model the culture that you want to see. You behave in the manner that you want others to behave, so that then becomes the entrenched way of doing things in that group or society or the department or the entity. So modeling tends to be a very powerful way of achieving a desired culture. And here, I'm assuming that we all agree with the definition or understanding of a culture. People have defined it variously. Other people say, don't get complicated. Culture is simply the character of the leader. Some people believe it's as simple as that. It's nothing but a reflection of the culture, of the character of the leader. If the leader is harsh, then it will reflect the culture of the entity. But anyway, some people have thought it's more scientific than that. They say culture is the way in which the inherent power of a unit is used to punish, promote, or permit. So the way you use your power to do those things is really the culture of the entity. And modeling becomes a very powerful tool to do that. Another thing you can do is bridge the proximity between yourself and the people that you want to influence. And I know you asked a family question. In the family, proximity is a very useful tool because you're close to the family members. The gap between yourselves and other members, desirably is short. So the proximity itself helps you to infuse certain habits and things to influence a culture. But not so much in an institution. And Chair, you asked the question, how are these things, how can then these aspects be transferred to an organization? And I think it's a little more complicated there because proximity is not a given. We all know that in some institutions, the board is, as they say, up there. Terms like that are used. The board is up there, meaning that the board is not proximate to the people that it's leading. And yet, modeling is an important way of disseminating cultural, characteristics. So where there's no proximity, then it becomes very difficult. But going back to the first question, how else would one influence in a culture? It's by creating habits and rituals. And I think we do that in the home setting. Chair talked about praying. Prayer is a ritual. And when it's done together, it forces people to behave in a certain way collectively. But going back to the mood in the middle and whether it's easy to influence the mood in the middle, I think other than not being proximate to the people that you want to influence, I think in institutions, there are layers of culture. Yeah? You will find that it's very, very difficult to come across any organization that has a homogeneous culture. You will find that the finance people behave a certain way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen?
No offense to
Internal audit. Internal audits have a different culture. Marketing guys are marketing guys. Yeah? So how does a board then, with this work group culture, which is a reality, influence these people in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Does modeling necessarily work? Does proximity necessarily work? Do rituals work? So the answer to your question, Chair, is that it's not as easy to use some of the domestic methods to influence culture flow to the middle, because the middle is not one homogeneous group. The middle is also a mixed bag of people, and each department arguably can also behave like the leader that is leading them, or can behave in a manner that promotes their specific roles or not. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth in what you've shared with us. As you were speaking, I was thinking about some of the things we teach in communication around barriers to communication. And they talk about physical distance and emotional distance. And I think the challenge, if you're sitting at board level, even in places where you might not have people in the same location, is how do we reduce that emotional distance from the culture that you want to see pervasive throughout the entire organization, cognizant of the fact that there will be subcultures, if you like, and how can we align those to what we want at the overall level. So I think some interesting food for thought. I was just thinking back to my days across the road, and yes, we marketing people are something else, but that's a story for another day. Rachel, let's come to you. And now I wanted to think about your childhood and your experience there. And what are some of the things that you can bring from your childhood experience into corporate life, where now we are thinking about this tone at the top, mood in the middle, and how it affects the energy at the bottom? What does the fervor at the bottom reveal about the health of an organization?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jackie, and it's a pleasure being here. It's really nice to see the very many faces in the room. Tone at the top, in the middle, at the bottom. I'll just talk about some things my late father used to say, Jackie. He always talked about him being a train and there being many carriages. And he said, when a train is moving and a carriage falls off, it doesn't stop. It keeps moving, meaning that nobody is in charge of your life. He always said it, each of you, my children, are carriages, and you should be in charge of your life. So when we were growing up, we all knew the buck stopped with us. And accountability, he spoke a lot about accountability, and I see this a lot in organizations. It's one of the key virtues I picked up as a child. The second thing, Jackie, is around the village. And this comes into organizations. When we're being raised, we're raised by a village. We're raised by biological uncles, non-biological aunties, and there was a sense of accountability back then, where you knew that if you did something wrong, you'd be summoned by the board. Then that was the board of directors. Now relating it and bringing it back home today, I see that at the board level, there's a lot of joint accountability, and that's why you have the chair, like Japheth, who is the chief chair with a big C, who will then call the rest of us board members to order and ask what happened in your committee. And then you'll call the management team and say what happened further down the line until you get down to the bottom. So the point around joint accountability and being raised by a village was a key virtue that I picked up, Jackie. And it's the third point I want to talk about is respect at the bottom, respect for your ecosystem. When I speak to CEOs and to board members, they say the most important people in their lives are, number one, the drivers, because they can't do without the drivers. So we were raised to respect the people at the bottom of the ecosystem. And this is where the majority of your employees will be typically in an organization. So the culture must be right at the bottom in order to get the passion from the people at the bottom of the ecosystem. So I'll add to that, Jackie, but I thought I should point out the three virtues that I picked up as a child: accountability, respect for the ecosystem, and owning your own future. Nobody owes you a living. If you're a carriage that's going to get off the rail, then you'll fall down and nobody's going to pick you up. So thank you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And I want to stay a little bit with you on that point. If you can speak to us about what does really healthy board culture look like? It's something we talk about, but what does it look like? And what are the biases or the blind spots that often get in the way of creating that, if you like, ideal culture? I feel like it's one of those things that's like a purpose or a vision. It's that utopia you never quite get to, but you're always striving to get there.
Thank you, Jackie. Interesting questions. Let me start with a healthy board culture. And I am fortunate to sit on 3 very good boards. I sit on TPS Serena for East Africa. I sit on Sanlam General. And of course, UBL with Chief, who has now left us formally. Japheth was my chair at UBL. And the board culture, determination of a healthy board culture is the ability, number one, to listen to each other. None of my chairpersons have ever been people who come and talk through the meeting. They actually did more of listening. The board members spoke, the CEO presented, and then the chair always comes in at the end. So listening, the ability for a board to listen and to appreciate that management actually knows more than the board. Mm-hmm. So the board at any one time should not think that they know more how to run the company or know better than management. So I believe if you have a board that listens to the CEO, calls the CEO in and says, we need to learn from you, and then appreciates and allows management to run with the board decisions. A non-operational board members who do not call the CEO every 5 minutes, what are we doing? Where is this board resolution? Why, I was driving to somewhere, I did not see the bars with banners. Why is that not the case? You cannot do that as a board member. So allowing management to run with your decision and giving praise. You need to acknowledge that the organization is run by the management team and not by the board. So culture starts at the top. The way the board members even walk through those offices. I've been to offices where people run, where they see board members. The board members Candy was alluding to, where the board member is a god, a small g. You need to walk in, greet everybody from the gate. Greet the gate man, let your bodyguard carry however many bags you have, but greet the gate people, greet the receptionists, go up, have a cup of tea and laugh with everybody. Already, Jackie, you're breaking down the barriers of you being a board member. And I keep telling my fellow board members, when we're at parties, why don't board members dance? Why do they sit back and say, oh, a board member cannot dance? But it's not a title. You have a name. I am Rachel, besides being a UBL board member. So when I go for a UBL show, I want to dance with the marketing team. And that does not take away my role as a board member who has to pick up the phone and ask why the numbers are going down. So it's about really breaking down those barriers. I think at times as board members, Jackie, we take our role too serious. We think we are hanging up on a pedestal, which is wrong. We're just as normal and as ordinary as the people that we're managing. So my advice to board members is be normal. Don't carry your title on top of your face and, round the corridor and saying, do you know me? When I come to Serena, I park my car normally. I have to go around like everyone else. I cannot call the GM and say, please send someone down to park my car. That would be wrong of me. But I could if I wanted to. And he would be okay with it, but it is wrong. So, Jackie, in a nutshell, let's stop carrying these titles. Culture is about coming down to the tone or the people at the bottom. I hope I've answered both questions. The biases, really, just speaking to the biases at the boardroom, everyone thinks when you get into a boardroom, there's this magic wall, and you're getting into the situation room, like Julius has said. Just be a board member who walks in and speak your voice. On the Serena board, I am the only woman, and there are 9 guys. But that doesn't mean I'm going to keep quiet when I go to Nairobi. I will speak because I have my points, I have read, I've researched about what's happening in all the hotels. So make sure you are a board member who adds value and break down all these biases at the board about not being able to speak, not being able to contribute, and not being able to allow management to tell you what is supposed to be done. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, Jackie, it's all about breaking down these. I wish there was a new title for board members. because I think it's overrated. I'm looking at Japheth here, who has more experience than me. I wish we would break down these titles and remind board members that we are as ordinary as the people that we lead. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm sure there are some tempers somewhere that have flared, but that is okay. We are here to shake things up a bit. But yes, both Japheth and Candy, if you can speak into that particular space about healthy board culture and watching out for those blind spots.
Since I have been referred to, and by the way, some people still call me chair, but I'm now chair with a small c. I think I agree, but it is so really what we are talking about, and this tone at the top is that we've got to be aware that those in the middle and those below the middle are looking at you. They're looking at you. Yeah, they are watching. They are saying, "You do this, but we'll do something else." So this question of values, beliefs, behaviors, and norms that will characterize the way the board works and the way decision making is done, is really being watched. Now, of course, there is. By the way, it's interesting when Rachel was talking. She was talking about train and grant or something. Was it who was on the train? You talked about trains.
Yes, no, my father was the main carriage, and the children are the
Can you imagine trains? I mean, for me, I talk in terms of bicycles at the highest. But so it is really that ethical and the behavioral expectations that you at the board there, you should go to be aware of, that they're looking. You can send those instructions, you can make those resolutions and so on and so forth, but for the middle to be able to implement and the one below to be able to do, you'll have to be very, very, very careful. And as I said, that issue of the expectations, both on the ethical and behavioral side, will set the tone at the top. And the staff is looking. You can lock yourselves in that room, put their board meeting in progress, and the coffees and so on can flow and so on and so forth. But they are watching, and they know, and they will listen, and they are waiting. Therefore, it is very, very important that culture, of course, there will be subcultures and so on, but the overall, is it a culture of openness? It's a culture of transparency. Of course, it doesn't mean that immediately after the board meeting, you just tell the company secretary to send the minutes, to all to see. But the whole point is that they are expecting, and they're very anxious. They want to know what have they been talking about. So how do you deal with that communication, and how do you break those barriers? But of course, within a certain extent. I mean, a board member is a board member at the end of the day, but they are part and parcel of the team, because none of those is going to function properly if the culture is not right. Yeah, and I know that we'll be talking about this as we go along. So so that leadership style, the ethical stance, and the strategic orientation. Rachel was talking about the board. Once there is a culture of going micro and so on, and we talk more about that, then you lose the strategy, because you must be driven by purpose and the vision, the mission, which you, the board, is ultimately responsible for. That purpose, vision, mission, values, and the strategy, you've got to live by that. So create a culture, or whoever is, all of us is, I think all of us as board members, all of you as board are responsible for making sure that you have a culture that you expect to become part of the organization culture. But there will be differences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Japheth. I was just looking at the article from PwC about the common biases, and I want us to spend a little bit of time speaking to these. They identify 4 that they say are the most common, and this was based on research they had conducted. And the first is authority bias, where you have experts in the room, and maybe everybody defers to one particular person and doesn't ask the hard questions. So maybe we'll think about circumstances where we can make that, how do we overcome those biases? The other one was groupthink, where great minds think alike. So we can all collectively go down the rabbit hole and achieve maybe a bad decision because we all thought that at that time that was something that was good. The other one is status quo. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is the way we've always done things here. So why should we rock the boat? Why should we do anything any different? And then the other is confirmation bias, where we rely on our own past experiences to confirm something we want to hold as truth, even in the face of situations where that might not be the case. So I wonder if you could speak to any one of those biases: groupthink, confirmation bias, where we think we are experts, the authority bias. So any one of those, or status quo. Candy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The one thing that those biases have in common is that they are forcing the boardroom to behave in a uniform manner. They are forcing us to decide or behave in a certain uniform way. And more, especially now in the dynamic market and business environment that our organizations operate in, we find that variety or diversity is actually an asset. Diversity of thought and approach is actually an asset. And anything or bias that kills diversity is actually going to cause the death of the institution. Because in a dynamic environment, the respondent dies if they cannot infuse enough variety into their thinking and ways of doing things. So that's why this culture conversation, especially now, becomes very difficult, because when we talk about culture, it's almost as if we are talking about a singular pattern of behavior, yeah? And yet at the same time, we know that variety and diversity is an asset. So is it really pragmatic or reasonable to expect a single culture in a single institution, while at the same time having enough variety to make us competitive in the global workplace? And I think people are beginning to think about this and taking a step back and saying, okay, guys, board members, don't kill yourself about not having a singular culture. What is more important than having a singular culture is the elevation of certain principles and values that lead us to that common destination. So we may not behave the same in a micro way, but we hold dear certain principles and values that help us get to the same destination. Because the variety in and between the different institutions and players in the organization is exactly the value we want to remain competitive in a dynamic world.
Okay, thank you, Candy. Before we move on to the next, and
to pop in just a
yes,
quick
okay.
one. I like the where Candy was heading. It is got to be principles based. I mean, boards are different. They work in different industries. I mean, in some boards, a simple thing like dress, you go to wear a 3-piece suit or something like that. At UBL, we just came in a shirt. You know, they're different. But if the principles based are, and you talk about groupthink, the principles based, does the board, whether it's the chair and so on, does the board allow different views in that organization? Or do they have an actual debate and conversation? Or do they, once so-and-so is the expert, has spoken, or the chair has spoken, everybody, you know, follows. And therefore, the exciting meetings happen outside the boardroom. Now, you've got to create that atmosphere. I always talk about the university councils, which I find, if you can substitute for, which I find very exciting. Because in a university council, those who have listened to me may have heard this before, apologies. The university council, the president of the Students' Guild is a member of the council. So is the top professors, the academic, and so on. So
in that, a truly good board culture, it means that those professors have got to listen to the student whom they marked the other day and gave 20%. Yeah. Now, this is a different environment. So it is got to be principles-based. And as I said, it's the values, the principles, and so on. Now, how you do that in a practical way will be different. Otherwise, it would be boring. But that is very, very critical. That is principles-based, and you have the values, mission, and so on. And groupthink comes because there are people who have got great ideas, but they are intimidated or they fear to get them out. And I think one of these disasters in the US, which is that one of those things they send rockets, they send over. I mean, part of the reason why there was that accident was because there was a guy in there who thought they were not doing the right thing, but he would say, but who am I now that, I'm the bottom of the pyramid now that the chair has spoken, who am I? The experts have said it. That is why that diversity in the board is that if you have a board just full of engineers for an engineering organization, you are going to end up the Boeing way. Thank you.
Thank you, Japheth.
Boeing way, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to take out just a minute or two to recognize the sponsors that we have in the room. So this particular session has been sponsored by Standard Chartered Bank, and we do have the Honorable Maria Chwanuka, Chair of Standard Chartered Bank, with us. We also have received support from ABI Finance, and we are privileged to have both the CEO, Mona Mugamba Seboliva, and the chairperson of the same board, Felix Okoboy, also with us in the room. So thank you very much to Standard Chartered Bank and to ABI Finance for making this session happen. So Candy, I come back to you, and we are back to these questions of culture, but this time we want to look at toxic culture. And I'm sure we've all seen the signs of dysfunction in the boardroom. What are the things or the indicators that would tell us that this is a culture that has become toxic? And have you ever found yourself in a situation where you are thinking, maybe unknowingly, you've contributed to this particular culture? And how do we then start to, if we acknowledge that it's toxic, what can we do to then turn it around and make it healthy again? Okay.
I think we've all seen, someone once said, toxic culture, you know it when you see it. and I think we've all seen aspects of it. But one of the things that really stands out when a toxic culture is prevalent is mistrust. Trust completely dies, and every aspect of the institution is questioned. The board no longer takes management's word for it and are seeking to find information behind the information. And in doing that, and to Chief Kato's point, gossip becomes more important than the board pack. What are people saying in the corridor? Because then the directors are likely to believe that angle more. And then real distress to the point that people are paralyzed, they can't function because they don't know what move the board is going to make. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a matter of survival. You're not working anymore, you're just seeking to survive because the environment is so charged. In that state, what people tend to do is they say, all right, I need to survive, and therefore I will just adapt. If the board wants more information, I will give it. If they want us to go in the left direction, we'll just do it because we just want to survive. Mm-hmm. And when the toxicity gets the leaders to survival, then really, the lines, the corporate governance lines between the board, management, and the teams that we're leading completely break down, because then management relegates its duty to the board takes over and starts to run the kitchen. And I think many of us contribute to this, many times unknowingly. The first unknowing way of contributing to this is by not remaining mindful of your borders and not remaining mindful of your lane. You see, as a director, especially if you're energetic and enthusiastic, it's very easy to forget that, I think you're descending to management territory now. Rachel gave the example of a CE being called and asked, why don't we have billboards here? Why aren't we sponsoring that? And a lot of it just comes from enthusiasm, but you're actually creating the environment that can lead to a bit of toxicity. So yes, I think unknowingly many of us can find ourselves there, but you see the signs when management just steps back and say, you know what, I'm not doing my job, that is running this institution, my job is now to survive. And when you start to see that, then you know the toxicity has reached a point where there are no it's just one unfortunate and distressed environment.
I don't know, Rachel and Japheth, if you have anything you want to add into that signs of toxic culture and what can we do to address?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jackie. And I was smiling as Candy was talking because my firm once had a client, and this was a public sector board in Uganda. And the environment was extremely toxic, and we were called in by the minister to intervene and do away with the toxicity. But what are some of the things that the board was doing? The board chairman had a car park slot at office. Audit chair had a car park slot. Remco chair had a car park slot. Staff did not have enough parking. They were parking on the street and in different places. So I asked if the chairman comes every day, and they said no, but he needs to have a slot when he comes. Second thing, the chairman used to go to office, park, and then request to use the meeting room next to the MD's office for his personal meetings. Can you imagine your chairman being right outside your door? You will not function. You will forever be sending tea, coffee, biscuits, checking whether he's okay. So we had to ensure the chairman was not allowed to go to office. Then one board member borrowed a car for the mother's funeral. He refused to return it. A consultant was brought in, paid money to ensure the car was returned. You can imagine the cost to government. Then this particular organization in 1 year, and this is a true story, had 54 board meetings. 54. Who used to call the board meetings? The chairman and audit chair. The MD would be called, we are going to Munyonyo, we are going to Chigo, please bring the board pack. Then he would say, what board pack are we discussing this time? And then they would say, just come, and we are sleeping over. So they would start at 9, meet up to 2, rest. Saturday morning they wake up to discuss the minutes of the day before. 54 board meetings. It was a disastrous board, Jackie. Toxic from the top. What did the rest of the staff start doing? Like Candy said, they did everything. It was a party in the organization. Zero productivity, numbers went down, zero performance management. By the time we went in, the organization had last had appraisals 3 years back. Why? Because the board do not have the moral fiber to ask management to bring the appraisals for the senior team. How will you present them when even you as a board, all your meeting is to discuss minutes every time? So it's a very good example of a toxic culture. But thankfully, 3 years later, the organization has been reformed. The board unfortunately had to be exited. The minister took charge, and now there's a very good board that understands corporate governance and only meets 4 times a year. From the 54 times. So Jackie, it's doable.
Thank you, Rachel. I just want to ask our online community, I notice you're really quiet in the chat. Please introduce yourselves, tell us where you are coming from. Also tell us whether you are currently serving on a board. Maybe in the room, if we can see by a show of hands, how many of you are currently serving on boards?
Jackie, just a quick one, the online chat is disabled. If we could please enable it. Somebody just sent a message. Thank you.
Okay, I think it has been sorted, so that's good. And then please post the Q&A, any questions in the Q&A section so that we can have that. We shall keep monitoring, so please keep participating. And as we are doing our conversation here, I would like the online community, I think we did have a poll queued up. If we can cue the poll for who you think is responsible for board culture. Because we are talking about this thing, but who really takes ownership? Where does the buck stop? So if we can have that as a poll for our online community, I don't know whether on our screens here we shall be able to have that for the people in the room. And I just also want to acknowledge the presence of the the chair of Uganda Civil Aviation Authority, Honorable Deputy Chief Justice Emeritus Stephen Kavuma. And seated with him on the table is Hajat Seviala, we call Mama Green, as she likes to be called. And I must commend her, she's with us. I don't think you've ever missed a boardroom masterclass session from the day we've started. So if she was in school, she would have gotten A+++ for attendance. And Professor Dorothy Okello, who is a board member also at Standard Chartered Bank. Nice to have you in the room. Okay, so as we are getting the results for who we think is responsible for board culture, we can maybe move on to our next question. And
Sorry, Chair, just before you move to the next
yes.
Rachel has made me think about something that we take for granted when it comes to toxicity, and that is language. Actually, language can be the one thing that introduces a toxic culture on the board and in the middle as well. Because language is one of those things that can create, can be mimicked very, very quickly. Certain things can be mimicked quickly, and I think language is one of them. If certain words or expressions are commonplace in the board, then and they're harsh, yeah. It allows for a certain behavior. It allows for bullies. It allows for relegation of people. I'll put you in your place kind of environment, and very quickly you can have a very toxic culture. So we think many times I will use strong language as a director in order to demonstrate how serious I am about an aspect or something, but actually it's central to either promoting or diminishing a culture that we desire.
Mm. And you're right about the language. I did work for an organization where, unfortunately, it was the CEO who was using swear words and was verbally abusive to staff. And in an open plan office, you can hear everything. The whole floor will hear what's happening. And as EXCO, we had to report our boss and say, look here, we can't be saying that we want to create this environment of trust and openness and respect for each other, and the person who is supposed to be modeling the behavior is the chief culprit. I mean, eventually he did get fired, but that was one of the reasons we really strongly pushed, because we said, look, it's not the time and place. This is not where you use that language. So it is true, because everybody then starts to think it's acceptable to do that. Staying on the issue of toxic culture, Japheth, I wonder if you could share with us, having sat on a number of boards and seen maybe several examples of this dysfunction, what are some of the questions boards should be asking themselves to ensure that they are keeping their culture going in the right direction, and how can they improve it?
I hope you're not saying I was sitting on boards which were toxic. How do you detox? I have actually trained a board that immediately after the training well concluded that was a toxic board, and so then I told how do you do with it, and all the symbols, all the signs that my colleagues have talked about were there. Heated arguments,
language like you do not know what you are talking about. These are board members. Things like getting involved in very, very micro things, you know, about salary and benefits. And that becomes a big topic for discussion. Actually, there was one comment on that board that we're talking about board members, but we have got to appreciate the power of the CEO, whether he or she is on the board. Because actually, you know, some boards, the CEO is sometimes very, very, very powerful. So in that board, I was training, I was not sitting on it. The board member said, Mr. Kato, it's very good that the CEO has not come to this meeting, because otherwise we would not have said these things. I said, so that openness we are telling is not there. Now, it is not because the fear was the CEO. But what you find also is really the behavior aspects are very, very, very important. And the one other experience I have seen and I have read is where you have on the board somebody who has a certain knowledge, could be a lawyer or an accountant, but you know their knowledge is very archaic or does not apply to now, and start raising technical issues which are totally out of date and actually not correct. And as a board member, you know, and then you get the danger where you get that board member also getting somebody else to support, and then you get into a situation where there is this clash and so on. But honestly, I think what are some of the things we can do is you have to go to call them to order. I mean, there must be somebody in that, whether it is the board chair or whether it is a lead director or a certain director who has got to call this to order. Mm-hmm. And then how do you handle board members? And how do you deal with them? You know, you've got, first of all, to keep this training we talk about, and here, because I do board training as a job, a profession. That is why the issue of culture, board culture, organizational culture, has got to be in the training agenda every time, because it is such an important aspect. I mean, I don't want to talk about culture eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because you've heard that so many times. But you can do that through actual training. But you need to identify, and then how do you bring those out of line back in line? It is actually talking to them, you know, either a one-on-one, or if the worst comes to the worst, reporting to the shareholder. That, you know, we have a problem with this person, and I've seen board members being terminated, or they sometimes conveniently their term have not been renewed, or they have been asked to leave, because you cannot operate. I mean, you need to just continue reading about the Boeing's story, and where you see there was a culture there was toxic, there was no accountability, there was safety was disregarded, and so on and so forth. And something else we do, by the way, on at the JKC is and in other organizations, to have a moment, that culture moment. So when you keep inculcating it, how many times do we go to church and the mosque and they tell us the same thing every day? You know, the 10 Commandments have not changed, since Moses brought them. We keep that, but also really get tough and make sure that you identify and you treat. But the other thing is that you also need to identify it, and that's why I think like board evaluation are very, very critical. A board evaluation should have questions on culture, and sometimes we get it. And sometimes you get an answer. Board members are saying that a certain board member does not, sticks on a certain point of view and does not respect other people's views. And then you identify that. So there will be, as Kanda has said, there will be disrespect. There will be, there will be a lack of harmony. You have the outside meeting. So what do you do? So it will be training. It will be awareness. It will be evaluation. And of course, if you are on the nominating committee and you have opportunities to to interview board members. Can you just don't say we now need these days, whereas Lindas of this world, these days we want a board member with ESG. Brilliant, eh? Yeah, but that is not enough. So we talk about this word fit. Just say, have a very thorough interview process of board members as a nominating committee to see what culture are they going to bring into the organization. Somebody may be very good in their area of expertise, but you may say from your research and finding that this person, because of their attitude, I know it all attitude, will not fit in a particular organization. Now, interestingly, whereas we board members both put in place all these procedures of how to discipline staff and so on, I have not seen many organizations having procedures of how to discipline their fellow board members. So you got to do that. So what has happened is that one of the areas to look at, and you can manage that, is managing. There are sometimes the toxic culture is brought about by self-interest or representing other people's interests in the organization, which means there is no trust. Yeah, people are undermining each other, and you see people sticking to a certain point, and you say it doesn't make logic. That's because they have a particular interest which they represent, or otherwise. So you have got to deal with that head on, and the chair should lead in bringing people to order. Don't tell me what will happen if the toxic person, the chair himself or herself. But you've got to do that and deal with them and have a conversation. And in many cases, people will see that is happening. But the evaluation process is very important. The recruitment process of the board members is very, very important. And continuous education and awareness is very, very important. But it is a very difficult issue to deal with. I mean, you can go to the major, in holding company structure, you can go to the major shareholder and say, you know what, if we are really going to meet the targets that we have set, we do not have the right board to do it. And because of this and this and that and that. Thank you.
Thank you, Japheth. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the shift that we see in recruitment, maybe for operational staff. In an organization, I hear a lot of HR professionals, and I can see my good friend Herbert Sake at the back of the room. I hear a lot of HR professionals now talking about recruit for culture fit. In other words, it's more important to hire somebody who fits in and can help to build the culture, as opposed to only looking at their qualifications and experience. Because they might be the best technical expert in that field, but they're the very people who will undo anything that you have done because they just don't fit the culture. And it got me thinking that maybe we need to take a similar approach for how we do recruitment for boards. Do we actually think about how the people we are bringing into those boards, in addition to the expertise, how will they build the culture in the boardroom so that whoever comes next finds that it's really a place they want to be and to contribute? So just something that was going on at the back of my mind. I just wanted to bring in our online community by reading a couple of comments, and we have started to receive some of the questions. Dorothy Masifa says, very helpful discussions. I find that culture in the boardroom is also affected by socially agreeable behavior and norms, which Kandi alluded to before. Arguably, our very pleasant personalities as Ugandans that are agreeable, refrain from rocking the boat, deferential to authority, do not make for robust debate unless there's a courageous individual. Otherwise, there's likely to be so much consensus on almost everything. It's important to be consciously aware of these tendencies and actively work on them. There's a question that I'd seen in the chat. I think we've kind of talked about it from Adieri Ngonzi. How does wine straddle the balance between strong language and political language? Where do you draw the line? Adieri, I don't know what political language is in this context. Maybe if you can give us a little bit of, a little bit more detail so that we can see how that works. And then Harriet Monge is asking, how effectively can middle management play their role to link the bottom and the top in this culture story? And this is open to all the panelists. I don't know whether, Rachel, you want to give it a shot first.
Sorry, Jackie, if you could kindly repeat the last question.
How effectively can middle management play their role to link the bottom to the top? So that mood in the middle, how do they balance the top and the bottom? Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. Interesting question. And fortunately, I started off as middle management, went to senior, and finally board. My advice to middle management is always, number one, copy your CEO. There are some board members, like Candy said, who are extremely zealous. They keep calling the frontline people and asking why something is not right. Do the right thing, copy your CEO when responding to this board member. Do not give factual information, or do not give confirmatory information on phone by saying, no problem, we will come to your office and sort it out. Tell them you're going to ask the CEO. Always default to the CEO, because the CEO is the board representative in management. If middle management begin to talk directly to the board, then EXCO is going to be eliminated, the MD is going to be eliminated. And that's where the toxic culture comes in, really, Jackie. So it's about copying your MD in, your CEO, your ED, and knowing that the board should not be talking to middle management. We are all guilty as board members. Just because we know the people from a society perspective, we tend to forget and tend to pick up the phone to escalate company matters. We need to desist from this. It's difficult, but it's doable. And then Japheth, I think, was going to talk about the political aspect.
Well, I really, of all things where I have some expertise in a number of things, by the way, but political whatever is not one of mine. But sometimes we talk about language. What we're talking about, you can be in a board and then you are reminded that what you are discussing is politically sensitive, politically explosive, and then it depends on who is on the board. And some of the boards have got political interests and so on. How do you balance that if they are going to impact on your on your performance? But it is also sometimes, see, you have board members with different skills backgrounds. There are board members that will help you deal with certain issues. There were those that are good to send to Minister of Finance or Minister of Energy, and there are those that are good to send to State House if need be. So as a board, that is where you've got to use those skills that you have. But that in itself can cause a toxic situation. So, you know, it's got the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say, of it. But yeah, the language is very, very critical, because unfortunately, not things which are supposed to be confidential, sometimes we find them, they are not that confidential. So you've got to be careful what you write down. Sometimes as you're writing, just assume that this thing is going to be on the social media the following day. But that's a topic for another day. Thank you.
With respect to that question, the board needs the middle band to infuse the culture to the rest of the organization. Because the board is too far removed from the entity in its totality to influence culture. So we need them. They are the agents. They are the only ones that can do that effectively. I've been reading this book. It's an interesting title. It's titled The Fish Rots from the Head, by Bob Garrett, and it's about the board. And he says culture is an ugly beast with a long history. And when you think about it, culture becomes culture because it has been done for so long. Mm-hmm. So if we really want the middle layer to infuse the culture that we want to the rest of the entity, we must do whatever those things are. We must do long enough. And going back to Japheth's example of what they do in the family, if you pray once and that is all, then that is all. In order for the family to continue praying even when you're not there, you've had to have done it long enough. So what the board needs to do is stop approaching culture drives as a project. And that's what we tend to do. You know, bring a culture project. Then the consultant comes and he has this document and even gives you timelines. A culture cannot have timelines. Teaching children good manners does not have a timeline. You just do it and you continue doing it. So if you want the middle layer to help, then you must do those things consistently and long enough. And just by infusion, that middle layer will start to influence the rest of the institution. And I think that's where we really drop the ball, because culture is not a project. It has to be formed, believed, and lived for as long as it needs to catch, like lighting a cigarette with wet charcoal. Really, I mean, you just have to keep at it until the cigarette lights. And I think once we approach culture that way, then we can hope that the middle will be impacted enough to spread the message to the rest.
As you know, when we are come to sit here, you see us sitting in these comfortable chairs, but you've got to prepare, you've got to read, spend nights reading and preparing. So I was doing that, and I found that there is a survey, and sorry, it's the US again, in the US, that you got to do these surveys actually to find out what people feel about the organization, and if you therefore you have to create a culture right from the top to the bottom of people being, free to say it. They don't have to give their names. But I was reading this. I found that they said this is not board culture, but the whole corporate culture, because remember, we have got to link the two. So the question, can you have a very good board culture and then the whole organization culture is toxic? No, you shouldn't get into that. You should get them aligning. But 37% of employees in the US think their organizations have a toxic culture. 37. Canada was 29% and Europe 26%. So we may be there, saying, we think we are doing all these great things, when those in the middle, who, as you said, what does middle mean here? Is middle the exco or what? The management team.
Combination of exco and heads.
That management team, if they really think that the board has got a toxic culture, right, then that strategy of ours that we approve every time will not be able to go. So toxicity it is important to say. So that I found that quite interesting, very high. I don't know what would happen if you asked in your own organizations what the people think. Have you asked? If you haven't yet, you better do. And if you need a consulting firm to do that, you get you'll get the email address. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Japheth.
Jackie, just to go to your issue, you and Chief raised this, the issue of measuring. Mm-hmm. So we are attuned to measuring performance. That's easy for us. We measure performance, but we are now at a time where we have to measure culture. Mm-hmm. So, to the question that you had, what should we do? We have to find ways of meaningfully measuring the culture temperatures of our institutions. Now, like everything else, you have off-the-shelf tools, things that you can buy and apply, and they will give you a result. But the result that they will give you is data. Okay? They will give you a lot of data. What tends to be more impactful in really measuring culture is the trend. So that data over several years to give you an indication on whether the culture is a conducive one or it is a destructive one. And again, this is a long haul. So the board must be patient with this exercise as well. Do it deliberately, but focus more on the trend than just the data points. And then draw from the trend what the suitable interventions should be. And then do them for a long time. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And I guess this is really the difficulty. But the tools are there, and we can apply them. What is important is that that gives you opportunity to measure behavior. Are people respectful? Are they honest? All these nice soft things. But the data points are not the point. The data points should lead you to a trend that then gives you a true sense of the organization's culture.
Yeah, so Kandi has already answered her own question, because I was going to ask, how can we measure to see whether we are actually embedding the culture? So that's fantastic. But maybe I want Rachel to speak to how can we equip, especially our ExCo and our management teams, with the tools, with the strategies to cascade this culture. Because it's one thing to write out the document, to have your values, your mission, your purpose written in the walls and, I don't know, screensavers on the computers. But because culture is very much about the lived experience in the organization, how do we teach people to live the culture? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Firstly, I advocate strongly for annual board and management retreats, where management goes away, meets for 2 days, and then board comes on the 3rd day, just to tell board what strategy initiatives have been changed or have been designed for that year, or if it's a midterm review of your 5-year strategy. So Jackie, number one, the board must meet with management, and they must sit in the same room, and management must be allowed to present. Because when we go to board, it's only either the head of production, head of commercial banking, or somebody who comes to present. The whole of ExCo isn't there. So that interface is very important. It's at that point that management then see how the board behave. Japheth alluded to it, the way the chairman talks. We've been called into boards where we've been told to shadow and sit and see how the chairman bangs the table, how the chairman says, do you know I'm a former MP, I'm a former this, but you're former. Who are you today? Stop telling us about the former. And the chairman, the first hour of the board meeting is the preamble of what the chairman has done. So we've been called in to shadow and listen as consultants, and then we tell the chairman, you've done very well, you're an excellent person, but that is not relevant in this board. Can we focus on what the mandate of the entity is? So I'm now addressing the public sector, because this mainly happens in the public sector. So number one, have that interface where you meet management and board once a year, go away, let management come up with a strategy, critique it as a board, and give them feedback. Then number two, I spoke to it, do not call junior staff. I once worked with an organization where the board members spent half their time calling drivers. I'm told the ED was away. I'm told the head of HR was away. Why are you talking to junior staff? Why don't you call the CEO and ask them? If you think he's never in office, do not micromanage. So the calling, picking up phones, that is something that is not going to allow your management to work. Then I know we spoke about it last time, but look out for that rock star CEO. Like Japheth has said, that CEO who the board fear, they would rather have a meeting without the CEO. Call the CEO to order. And that's when you bring in an expert to sit with both the chairperson and the CEO, and then you talk about the things. But in most cases, the CEO has gone to the appointing authority for protection, because the board is literally operating in their space. So as board members, we need to know when to pull back and to avoid stepping in the CEO's office. Then respect for each other. If your management team is seated in a board meeting and you're shouting at each other as board members, you're not speaking to each other, you are on your phone. In board meetings, it's extremely disrespectful for every board member to be running their farm, running, transportation. Their containers are stuck at the border and they're walking out to pay taxes in the middle of a board meeting. So we need to learn to put away our phones. The management team has labored for a whole quarter to put a huge board pack for you. And some people even walk into the boardrooms, for those who still print out paper, and they tear the envelope in the boardroom when they haven't read the board pack. Then they start saying, please take me through page 1 to page. How unreasonable can you be as a board member? So it's extremely important, Jackie, for us to respect each other. And finally, let us please avoid the side board meetings. You know those meetings before the real board meeting? At midnight, you meet the chairman at Serena. In a room, you don't even meet at the bar in case you're seen. You get a room, you're discussing, you're lobbying. Let's avoid those side board meetings, because when you go in, it's okay to try and align some people, because you need to have people who are going to buy into whatever you're trying to pass. But do not have the main board meeting outside the boardroom, because then it cascades to the people at the bottom. So in a nutshell, Jackie, there's a lot for us to do as board members. But my final point, and last week I learned that there was a school where board members and executives are taught to listen. I did not know there were listening academies globally. You're taught to listen for 7 hours. If we could be better listeners at the board, I think our organizations will transform drastically. Because whilst management is presenting, you say, scroll to page 54. I already read the pre-board pack, but I have bothered to come to present to you. Just give me time. Listen, and then speak after I've finished presenting. So those are some of the tips I would share, because I've been on both sides of the table as management and as a board member. And I know I still have a lot of work to do to improve some of my board skills along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I see both Japheth and Candy are itching to pitch in. I don't know who.
I was just going to say that it is very important. In financial services, we talk about know your customer. It's very, very important for the senior management to know their board, know them. And then, on the other hand, also, we board members should know our senior executives, the EXCO or the one below EXCO. And then if you can create that opportunity at the annual retreat where you actually totally socialize and be together. Because, outside, there are things that you can say outside the boardroom and those inside, but come to understand people more. And we did one exercise with one company where, the senior management and the board were together. They were all, trying to hold basins of water, using their legs and so on. So that at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we're all part of the same team, but we cannot all do the same job. Yeah. But some of these boards Rachel is talking about, I wish I did not know a board where you have your own parking, or where you go, you go to stay, get accommodation for 2 days, before the board starts. I thought you were my friend, but you haven't told me about those. Thank you.
Yes, Candy.
There was once a chairman who was assuming a very toxic board, and everybody thought he would not make it. So they asked him, Chair, what strategies do you intend to employ to manage this board? Your predecessors have had a very rough time. And he said, the good Lord gave me 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. And I intend to use them in that proportion. And I think that is exactly the point that Rachel is saying. The listening should be more than the speaking. I think a lot of that healthy proportion can help us manage even toxicity in the highest levels.
And I hope...
But the toxic board I talked about, after, not the result of the training, but after that, the company secretary resigned, the chairman of the board resigned, and the chief executive was dismissed. So, these are very, very, you've got really to be careful about and manage these matters at very early stage, because it could result into a total disaster. Thank you.
Okay. And I hope that the listening we're talking about is active listening, not selective listening, because you can pretend to be listening, but you're not really. So I want to open up the session, because we literally have 30 minutes left. I hope there is a mic that can go in the room as we take some of the questions that are coming through online. One of the questions is from Paul Ankunda, and he asks, is it true culture stifles or builds innovation? This has been an argument lately discussed by founders. I'm assuming people who are startups. So I don't know who will want to take that question.
Let me have a go. Paul Ankunda, I hope he's in Geneva or somewhere, if it's the Paul I know. So creating, the other thing we've been talking about in organizations, creating a culture where it is not a death sentence to fail. to make mistakes and so on. Now, I'm not saying, don't go and say, Japheth Carter said it is okay. You can just make mistakes, in the financial statements and so on and so forth. But a culture of innovation is a culture of allowing people to try and fail and try and try and try again. And so it is accepting that, it is through trying once or twice that we will succeed. It's a very interesting. Rich and I and Mr. Okoboy now have been in the brewing industry. There is an innovations. There is a section where just every day that is their job. That's what they are doing. That's what they are doing every day. Oh, Jackie, of course, has been in that. That's what they are doing every day. There are a lot of things. You see something coming to market. But before then, a lot has gone on. But you must create that atmosphere. But on the other hand, you must also reward. You must also reward people who innovate and ideas and so on and so forth. So it is important that culture is there, so that, especially now that we are getting young, dynamic people, very savvy in a lot of things and so on, and are willing to and are happy to innovate, and that's what they enjoy. So just create that atmosphere, and when they get it right, reward. When they get it wrong, encourage them to do it and do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Japheth. Annabelle has the mic, so if there's anybody in the room, and Emma has one, please to introduce yourself and ask the question. Don't first give us a thesis about where you came from. Get to the point, ask the question. Thank you. It's Fiona.
Thank you very much. My name is Fiona Wall from League of East African Directors. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much to the presenters. My question goes to Rachel and Candy about culture and the fish rotting from the head. If culture is such a long haul, how can a board director who has probably a 3-year term without any assurance of being renewed actually do anything that is impactful? How do you study trends with such a short term? And unfortunately, sorry, that's one question, but then also plugging it into succession planning. Because I think as part of culture, there should be some succession planning for the board. How do you relate those two to answer the question of being relevant in determining and guiding culture?
Let's take 3 questions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, the panel. My name is Peter Kawiju. I work at Umeme. Great discussion here, and a lot of ideas picked. Rachel, I'm not a former MP yet, but yeah, thank you. You did share actually about the need for board members mingling and interacting actually with teams when such a time comes. And then Candy did mention also about the need to be very cognizant about not crossing the lines, especially as we carry on with these activities. But how do we pay attention to that to ensure that even when you're interacting, you're actually not crossing the line? And the last one is regarding today's theme. At the risk of appearing like maybe one would be micromanaging, while we are setting the tone at the top, the mode in the middle, and Fervor at the bottom. Where is it possible, or in current practice, or where you sit through your experience, at what point have you paid attention? At the bottom and also the middle, especially in setting the tone. Thank you very much.
Let's take one extra question for this round.
So thank you, good afternoon. My name is Josephine Osia, and my question is, how do you deal with a powerful CEO? And this is mostly in the public sector, where you have a CEO who's appointed by the minister, and then the board members are also appointed by the minister, and then you get to this board, and the board members all fear the CEO, management fears the CEO. Once the CEO has said, they toe that line. How then do you manage in that situation? And then the other one is really linked to what Rachel said. So if we say that the middle is what we are going to use to infuse the culture, but then again, if we are saying that the communication has to be strictly with the CEO, wouldn't you then rather have a communication protocol at least with the middle, as opposed to channeling everything through the CEO? Because again, if you have a powerful CEO, then the culture might not really get to the level that you want. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can first take those.
Japhet, do you want to go first? Should I go first? And take Fiona's probably, and then I'll pass it down the line. Thank you very much for Fiona for coming. And LEAD is our partner. Thank you for responding to our invite today. Culture and the fish rotting from the head. How do you study trends within a very short time? And this is where organizations like JKC come in, because that is where you must have board induction. And the biggest mistake many of us make is to have your board come on, start working, and then 2 years later, you call in organizations to come and do board induction. It should be done within the first month of a board being appointed, because it's during this board induction that you're going to talk about culture, organizational culture. And the board induction training that we now conduct is very different. We don't focus on the technical competencies or the technical functionalities of the organization, but we focus more on the culture. How we even go to detail. Japhet will tell you, we talk about how to eat, how to use cutlery as a board member. Fine dining, because if you're a board member and you don't even know how to sit at a dining table and how to use the right wine glass. So we take you through the nitty-gritty detail of fine dining, meeting etiquette, phone etiquette, everything around etiquette. We have a half-day session just on etiquette before you get into sustainability and everything around that. Then we talk about presentation skills, so that you do not pick up the microphone as a board member and all you're saying is, I would like to align with the former speakers. What are you aligning with? Can you tell us what you want to say? And then you say, I had wanted to say. No, you have the microphone. What are you saying? Say, you know, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My point is ABCD. This is my view. Own your view. So part of the board induction training that we do has a whole section on teaching board members how to speak. Because you shouldn't take it for granted that your board members can speak or have spoken in a boardroom. So Fiona, it's about what you're telling them when they come in. Then that's where the rules, do's and don'ts will be. Things to do with borrowing cars. Yes, you can borrow a car, but please return it after 2 days, not after 6 weeks. And it's not a daily occasion. You're going for a wedding, you want a car. You have a funeral, you want a car. You have to draw the lines. So the code of conduct, it's during that time that you have the board code of conduct. What should a board member do? What should a board member not do? Please remember your board members are not bound by your HR manual, because many people try to pass the HR manual upwards to the board. No, the board should have its own board charter and its own rules. And allow me to talk about Peter's point as well of how far should you go as a board member. Felix and I are on the breweries board, and we have some very interesting parties at times. So you need to know when you've drunk a bit too much and when to put down your whiskey glass. You need to know when to dance and when to sit down. Peter, you can't keep dancing and going down with all that stuff till you're rolling on the floor with them. No, you draw the line as a board member. But that doesn't mean that Felix and I should sit in a corner and isolate ourselves and say, this is the board corner. And it's only the MD who comes to whisper to us. No, we should be able to interact and talk to everybody. So Fiona, the answer is board induction. That will help you. And then have annual refresher trainings for your board members. Please do not send your board for corporate governance training in writing minutes, reading minutes. No, culture, focus on the little nitty-gritty things that we're talking about. Dress code. There are some board members who have walked into organizations with a t-shirt and a jacket and a suit. But he's in a suit. But what's in that t-shirt? It has to be a pinstripe shirt, tie. You know, talk to them about what your culture is. Japheth said, in the breweries, you can wear anything. No one will care. But be decent. Not anything. You need to be decent. When you're sober, yes. Be formal. But then in the banks, we know you must be three-piece suit or whatever you need to wear. And even in the hotels, we have to be very smart. So Fiona, I hope I've attempted to answer that bit, and Peter as well, on drawing the line. Know your limit, and then have a friend at the board who keeps telling you, a sounding board. At every board, make sure you have a sounding board. Japheth was my sounding board, and he's gone. So Felix, maybe I'll be coming to you soon. And this is the person who tells you, Rachel, you're overdoing it. They whisper to you and say, Rachel, keep quiet. Now you've overtalked, you've over-smiled, you need that sounding board at the board level, because you don't know everything and you need the guidance. So I'll pass it on down to Japheth and Candy for the next questions. Thank you.
Yeah, let me answer Josephine's question. There are many reasons why I'm answering Josephine's question. By the way, congratulations. That's the chief executive of the Capital Markets Authority. All of you have been making money on those shares. Yes, to be honest with you, I am not very comfortable with the arrangements, especially in government agencies, of the minister appointing the CEO. In my view, I think it would work very well if the minister appoints that board, empowers the board to appoint their CEO. Because, as you said, it can really cause real problems where the CEO reminds the board members, I was appointed by the minister, you were appointed by the minister, and that can cause, and also a little bit of disempowerment. But of course, sometimes they say on the recommendation and so on and so forth. But I think empowering the board to choose their own CEO and their own exco is a very, very good measure. And yes, because the CEO will sometimes can be in charge. You can get an organization where the CEO is more powerful than the board. And that would be toxic, actually, on the organization. I think the second question that Josephine asked may have to go back to Rachel on communication protocol with the middle. But let me also, Fiona, about a 3-year board term is rather short. Because, to be honest with you, it depends on the organization. It takes a lot of time to learn the organization, and as you say, couch and adjust and come part of it. So again, those who are in charge of either memorandum of articles or for boards or the agencies, from a corporate governance perspective, I think 3 years is rather short. But it is also very, very important, as you said, to do the succession. But 3 years is not it's a very short term for you to have adjusted. But then, as I said, the succession plan is very, very important, because the big thing with the succession is looking at those skills, what you need. And they are dynamic. Culture is also dynamic. I mean, I come from a kingdom. The culture that was there in 1800 and what it is now, is changing, but the principles remain the same. So I think I would say that, Joseph. By the way, in Tanzania, sometimes it is even more difficult, because the chief executive is appointed by the president, and the board members are appointed by the minister. So it can get very, very, very tricky. So I agree with you. But an important thing is the board. If you have a strong board, if you have a good board, they can manage that strong CEO. But it is not something that is easy to go around. I think that's all I can say about that. So maybe Rachel, you want to? Oh, sorry, I'm taking over. I'm taking over your job. I'm sorry.
No, I was just wondering if Candy wanted to weigh in on the questions that were asked.
Fiona, thank you for the question. And yes, indeed, culture is one of those things that would require more than a 3-year term to meaningfully contribute towards. So I guess the most that we can do is hope that the boards that we're joining actually do have a culture plan that is already in place, and that in your 3 years you're contributing to embedding that plan. And if it doesn't have the culture plan, then you're putting it in place and hoping that the future directors actually carry it through. The problem is that most times when we change the directors, you refresh the culture plan. And that's exactly how you start to destroy it. So as directors, we should be comfortable with making the contribution while we are on the seat and passing on that same good plan to the next people to carry forward. I think that, especially for culture, that just has to be done that way. Peter, when do we not cross the lines? When do we know that we are about to cross the line? I think Rachel answered it. We must approach being a director as an actual profession, to study and prepare to be a director. So the appointment letter is the beginning of preparing oneself to actually be a governance professional. So we must study, and we must go through the induction and take all these things seriously, because we actually don't know. There are lots of things about governance that we don't know. So we are appointed on the premise of being good professionals, good practitioners, but we actually are ignorant in governance. So you must study and actually deliberately expose yourself to the knowledge that is available for directors joining a board. And then finally, the politics has been handled by my senior, so I don't need to talk about that.
Mine is old-fashioned politics. You go to the new one.
I will talk about using the middle to influence the culture. It is true that directors should not be operational. I think that's a given. We all agree. Directors should not be operational. But when it comes to culture, the two levers that you have are proximity and modeling. Now, you can't use proximity at a distance, isn't it? Yeah. So in order to use proximity as a tool for culture embedment, you've got to be close to the people you want to influence. And I think for culture specifically, directors must find a way of creating enough opportunities to meet and engage with the managers. So this end of year engagements, the strategy things, and all these celebrations at the end of the year are very important, because that's where the proximity happens. That's where the modeling takes place. So yes, you're not being close to management so that you can be operational. You're being close to them so that you can model. Just in the same way as we model in our homes, you are close to the child, and therefore you model and influence. So I think there's a little bit of a distinction there. I don't think a distant board can hope to infuse or use the middle to infuse cultural principles or cultural priorities. Yeah.
Thank you, Candy.
Can I have just a quick one? Where I talked about the board being empowered to appoint the CEO. The other practice, not practice, the other what I see, especially again in bodies established by acts of parliament and so on, is that the board term, at one time the whole board's term ends and the new board completely comes in. So we've been struggling with this thing called of staggering the board, because you can write down you can't write down you can write it down and so on, but so you need to have this continuity. You need to have a board member who will say, Candy, we don't do such things here. Okay, so I think that's another area that those who are able to influence things should influence. Stagger the board. Let not all go, because then you don't even get into a situation where you actually have no board. I mean, how can you have an organization and has no board for a year or 2 years? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Japheth. We have 12 minutes, which we need to now manage. So we'll take 2 questions from the room, and please keep it short and snappy. In the Q&A session online, we have a number of questions centered around accountability, transparency, and making sure that there is access to information. I will try and combine them so that we can do that. And then in the meantime, think about what you want to say about creating a legacy around culture. And we shall do, all our panelists will take that as their parting shot, so to speak. So the two questions, I was told there were two hot ones. Yes, Hajati, and then we'll come to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Hajat Green. Rachel, the listening school, I'll come to you. I need the address. About the powerful CEO, this is a question that comes in every space. But I want to hear from you if we have had CEOs that earn, say, 80 million, and we have had the board chair, I think the maximum is something like 2 million or 3. I don't know if that has any bearing on this CEO being very, very powerful, irrespective of who appoints the CEO. The other question that I have is, as a board member is coming in, you have mentioned that we need to judge the culture fit. I'm trying to look at what sort of question that we can bring out the culture fit of a board member, a new one that is joining a board. And then lastly, you like Japheth, this lead director. I'm just trying to see how does a lead director emerge, and what is the role, and how do we ensure that this lead director does not overshadow the other directors? Thank you so much. Those are my questions. The last one, of course, is the bottom. How do you receive as board members? Now, this is from experience. How do you receive the feel of the bottom of the institution as a board member? Thank you so much.
The other question?
We have one more.
Thank you very much. This is very enlightening. My name is Alan Rakakoko, and I work with Umeme. My question is about, I know Rachel, actually you all were talking about the need to sort of separate middle management from the board, okay, within certain limits. I'm just thinking about the Barings Bank incident, where a rogue trader who probably didn't have a lot of contact with the board took down a bank. And there are instances where you have maybe internal control challenges, and the board doesn't actually know until they're in the dock, where they're in trouble. So in light of a board's fiduciary responsibility, are there any instances where there's justification for the board to get around senior management and find out some things for themselves, especially if they're trying to either protect the business or protect themselves? Thank you.
Okay, and then the other question?
We have one written down that says, how do you sack a non-performing board member or board chair? Or do you outlive their term painfully?
Thank you. Thank you, Mona, for the invitation. Mine is on the issue of evaluation and recruitment. My name is Yana Mudu. I run the FinTech Association of Uganda. What happens in cases where the board is chosen by the members? How do you evaluate if the members have chosen someone and say this is not fit for the board or they're fit for the board? Thank you.
Okay. I think we can take that.
Thank you, Jackie. Should I go first? Just to qualify one of the comments I made, and I see a couple of the questions are around that. When speaking to management, and I know Alan asked this, and Josephine as well, when we mention interfering with management, it's okay for the board to speak to EXCO. So the board can call head of legal director, your commercial director, but should not go the level below. I am being told to speak away from the microphone. So the board should not go below EXCO. But does the board need to call the CEO each time they are speaking to EXCO? No, you don't. Otherwise, it will become too routine for you to pick up the phone. But it's okay to speak to EXCO. Should you ask about the CEO, whether the CEO has done something wrong or not? Ask your EXCO members? No. pick up the phone and have that conversation with the CEO. So ask about business and ask about things that have not been presented. Because at times the board packs come 3 months later when so much has happened. So it's okay for a board member to check. Pick up the phone and say, I passed this place, I noticed this was happening. Are we okay? Just give me the assurance that everything is okay. And it speaks to the question Josephine had asked. But before I hand over to Japheth, the Rockstar CEO, we've worked with clients where we have literally locked ourselves in rooms in Serena again with a chairperson on one side and the CEO. And we've told them both to speak. And they've spoken for 2 days. You talk the whole day, you go, shower, sleep, come back, and they're both opening up and saying, this is what I think you're doing wrong, this is what I think you're doing. You need to get external people to intervene at times. If you think the CEO is appearing too untouchable, there are reasons why they're doing that. They're trying to protect their staff, and it's usually not related to pay hajat. Because honestly, it would be unfair for a board member to expect to earn as much as the CEO, because the CEO does all the heavy lifting and board members only come in now and again. So there's usually an underlying reason, unless that person was politically appointed and they're not competent for their job. But if you bring in a third party, it could be someone else minus the minister. Don't bring in the appointing authority to do the intervention. And there's a lot that Japheth can talk about. There are many examples we can use, but bring them into one room, bring the chair, bring the CEO, listen to both of them, and then work out a roadmap on how these issues can be resolved. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes, Japheth, you want to go next?
Actually, the topic of the relationship between the CEO and the chair is one that is always discussed, and a lot has been written about, and I think something that we can discuss. But Hajat, the concept of a lead director is not very common in our system here, but the others where it is instituted and they have what they identify as a lead director. However, the chair as the leader will always know among their board members the person who really is likely to handle certain situations, to assist the chair in handling certain situations. You know, when it is somebody asked, how do you sack a non-performing board member? But within the organization, sometimes it's the chair of the nominating committee or the chair of the audit committee. But although there is no lead director designated, but the chair will always know among the board members somebody who could be given a certain responsibility. And and sometimes it's somebody who has been on the board much longer, who knows the system. And that's why I was saying I'm not very comfortable with where all board members go at one go and you have new board members. So how do you sack? I mentioned this at the beginning, that whereas we have all these procedures for getting rid of staff who don't do well and who don't perform, how do you get rid of a non-performing board member? I'm going to pass that question to Candy. Jackie, can I? Thank you.
Talk about the dangers of being on a panel. I would like to answer the question with regard to fiduciary duties first. Alan, you asked about fiduciary duties. So in the waterfall of governance, the fiduciary duties have been delegated to the board by the shareholder. The shareholder has said, I have a dream to set up this enterprise, and I have delegated that authority to the board. So the board is already a delegatee. It further delegates to management to do the footwork. If at any time it should feel that management is not carrying out the delegated duty in accordance with the expectations of the shareholder, who were the first line of delegation, they can then do the work themselves. It is a rare thing, but in the waterfall of governance, it can happen. Where the board says, I have delegated this to you, you are incompetent, you've not been able to do it, I will retrieve some of that delegated power and handle it in a different way, either myself or hand that power over to somebody else who I feel will do it, because ultimately, I remain answerable to the shareholder who performed the first delegation. So yes, it can happen, but I said it's a rare thing and it's an unfortunate thing. But I think in the waterfall of governance, it's not an unlikely scenario. Yeah. Hajat, you talked about the board having a feel of the bottom. And I think we earlier had a discussion about measuring culture. I think if we use the various methods that are available to us to measure the cultural temperature of the institution, the board can require that those reports go directly to the board and give the board an opportunity to see for themselves whether the culture is conducive or not. What happens many times is that these cultural surveys and all these things are then further processed at different levels, and then the board is given either a skewed picture or a picture that will favor middle management. Yeah? So I think one way, if a board is really concerned about the fervor at the, what did you call it, Chair?
At the bottom.
The fervor at the bottom, then you can require those reports to come directly to the board. They can be discussed by management, but the board has sight of the raw picture to give it an insight as to what is actually happening at the bottom. And then finally, the question regarding the choosing of members by shareholders and whether they are capable of making sure that those directors are fit for purpose. I think what management can do, which I think is common practice now, is develop a skills map, an aid. So you give the shareholder a view of what skills are available on the board and which ones are missing. And that way hope to influence who they choose and bring to the board. It's an interesting, persuasive way of making sure that you get fit for purpose directors.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring together some questions that have come through our online participants, like I mentioned earlier, around the accountability, transparency, and sharing of information. Some of them have been partially answered by the responses in the room. How do you handle a powerful CEO? The other, I think, 2 or 3 questions that have come through is, what do you do when you have either a board chair or a board where information is not flowing properly between the 2 parties? So you send things up into the board and they sort of disappear into a black hole, or you have a chair who is not making decisions. You've presented all the work, done the clarifications, but things just take forever to come out of the board, and there's some sort of shroud of secrecy around things which you think are necessary for you to run the business, and that information flow is not working. I don't know who wants to take it, and then we shall end with your parting shots around what legacy do you believe you would like to see around boards and culture, and if you have been in a situation where you've influenced culture, what is your personal experience of when you left? What was your legacy of culture on that particular board, or what are you building maybe on the ones you're currently serving? And that's how we'll wrap up. I beg your indulgence for about 10 more minutes. We get through that one question and those parting shots, and then we'll bring this to a close.
I will not answer that question, but I'll answer the one that was given to me by Chief Japheth. I will be very foolish not to do that. But how do you sack a board member? I think sacking a board member is a function of the quality of your contract. If your appointment instrument does not give you the tools to relieve yourself of that relationship, then you will be stuck. So make sure that the weight that your document has given to entry and how that person will function is the same weight that it has given to exit. Pay attention to exit clauses. They must be sufficient Sufficient how? Sufficient to enable you do a clean cut. Because there is nothing as nasty as getting rid of a director in an untidy way. It's a reputational risk to the institution, yeah? Many times we've chosen these people because of their hierarchy in society, and therefore they cannot be treated in a shabby manner. So your best bet is to have an instrument that is really tight on how to sever a relationship. Other than that, it becomes a negotiation. If you want me to leave, give me such and such. And that becomes very untidy, because the person may be in an offensive situation, yeah? But they're making demands because you don't have the handles in your documentation to sever the relationship.
Okay, so the responses to the question around information not flowing between the board and management, decisions being delayed, information being withheld, yeah, and then we get into the legacy and we wrap up.
Let me just, God, from Kande's answer, it is easier to be married than to get to a boat. Yes, I think one of the things about communication and information and things being held up and management being frustrated by a lack of decision from the board and so on and so forth is real. And how do you create an opportunity for the board or for those in charge to know that there is a frustration at the bottom? We have we have in some of our board evaluations asked the management, senior management, those who deal with the board, to actually evaluate the board, not the individuals, and just say what are really these points that make your work difficult to achieve the strategy, to achieve the targets. You know, what would you like to see changing, and so on and so forth. And again, it will depend on the culture of the organization. There are some organizations that would say straight away, "Oh, Mr. Kato, but we are the board members. I mean, we're not yet we are supposed to evaluate them and not them evaluate." So find a mechanism of that coming out, and it is a question of the culture you create. You know, it may be seen as a criticism, but it can be seen as a help. So create a situation where, as a board, we're talking about culture. Create a culture where you accept feedback from those you supervise, and then they raise issues. So when we do this evaluation, we don't evaluate the individual board members, but we say the board as a whole. You know, what's happening? Well, they are not, the board gives us tasks, but they are not very clear. You know, they keep moving. You know, they never, how many meetings, the 50 meetings Rachel was talking about, our matter is always being deferred and so on. Because otherwise, board members, you're not going to have the moral authority to be able to enforce what you want the organization to do when yourself you're not doing your job. I mean, being on the board is a serious matter. When I do train, first question, why are you on the board? If you're going there for a cause, then you're not in the right place. If you're going there for the money, you can make money elsewhere than being on the board with these responsibilities. So I think that system can help speed up the frustrations of information flow and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Japheth. Rachel, you want to speak into that information flow, or you're happy to do the parting shot around legacy and culture?
I'll briefly speak to the information flow, and then I'll give my parting shots. Make use of your company secretary. Your company secretary is the one person who has the power to call the chairman and ask why action item 1 on the tracker has not been closed, and vice versa, the CS can call the CEO. So we need to make use of the very powerful candies that we have, because some of them are more powerful than either the chairperson or the CEO. But let me come to my parting shots, Jackie. And I, first of all, would like to thank everyone who's come and everyone online. But I want to say I have been very lucky to be mentored, or to have been mentored by one of the best board people we have in Uganda, and that is Japheth Kato. So please clap for him on my behalf, because I think our journey started more than 15 years ago, and Japheth has been an absolutely great mentor. Why am I sharing this? Because as board members, you at times forget that you need to have a board mentor. not the business mentors who push us in the other spheres of life. But the board mentor who's going to open doors for you, who's going to tell you when you get into a board meeting, please listen, don't overtalk, do A, B, C, D. So what legacy would I like to leave? And I hope my legacy is reflective of all the hard work Japhet has put in. Number one, I want to be remembered as a board member who added value. To the point of whether we recruit technically at the board now, the answer is no. What value are you bringing to the table? What doors have you opened? What taxes have you reduced? For some of us with Felix who are always on the tax front, what dots have you connected? What did you say when you attended that board meeting? So that is the legacy I would like to leave. And I hope that on the boards that I sit, after a board meeting, everybody walks out and says, Rachel did add value to this particular issue. And finally, Jackie, I keep a personal evaluator. Every month, I evaluate myself as a board member. What have I added to Sanlam? What business have I given them? What have I done to Serena in terms of getting concessions in the park or anything? What have I done to UBL? It's not about going to pick your paycheck like Japhet has said. Have I added to the bottom line? So I evaluate myself on a monthly basis, and it helps me it helps me push myself to add value. So that is the legacy I would like to leave, and hopefully this trickles down to the MD and the rest of the staff. So thank you, Jackie.
All right.
Thank you, Rachel, for those very kind remarks. I closed my ears when you were saying that. But just one thing you touched about, which we don't do much of, this mentoring and coaching. Because we put people into positions, and then there you go. Somebody has never been a chief executive, somebody has never been a CFO, you haven't been on the board. So we must institutionalize mentoring and coaching in the organization. And you got to do it at the right time. I mean, sometimes you've been there for 3 years, and somebody's saying, oh, we need a mentor for this particular person. And for the discussion, really, I say again, the culture, once you take it, the ethical and behavior expectations, then you've been there. Legacy for me is just to see, to demystify this business of being on the board. And demystification means really enabling more people to get on boards, getting the balances right, getting young people there, getting people of different gender there, getting people maybe, so that this is demystified, because there are very many capable people out there who can get on the board. So if in the process, in the work I do, demystify this and then emphasize that it's a human nature, it is a team thing, then I'll be remembered for that, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Japhet. Candy?
Similar to what has been said before, I think the relevant legacy today is leaving the institutions in a place where they can tap into the wealth among the Gen Zs. Right now, I think the world has a Gen Z issue. Many of us think they are not conformist. Some people think they're a nuisance. But the truth is, someone told me there's wisdom among the Gen Zs. And if we listen, they can actually be the tool to take this continent to the level that we need to be, because they are the majority anyway. So I think our relevant legacy will be to change the culture of the organizations to give those people room to contribute to the heights that the continent needs to get to. Because that's really where the wealth is. Unfortunately, the cultures that we espouse in our institutions are too tight, are too stiff for those types of people to make meaningful contributions, yeah? Whereas we still sit in a boards where we're called director so-and-so. Now, in that kind of culture, immediately you have alienated a person who has a hot IT idea, because now they have to deal with the formalities, the honeys for the chairman kind of thing. But we've got to loosen ourselves in order to allow them to contribute, because that's the only way that our continent can survive. So if I can contribute to creating an enabling environment for that new wealth to emerge and show itself, then I think it will be a good contribution.
Thank you very much, Candy. And you've spoken into one of the questions that we had online, and I think that's the answer that they were looking for. How do we create space for a range of voices? For those of you who follow companies that are considered to be disruptors, they always talk about, I think it was Apple, make way for the crazy ones. Because in that crazy lies some wisdom that you might be missing out by not having a culture that is embracive of diversity of ideas, even when they go against the very nature of what you hold true. So, ladies and gentlemen in the room and online, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have gained value from the conversations in the room, from the comments online. At least I know that has been done. People have sent their thanks. I would now like to call upon Linda Biribono to close us out. And as is our tradition, please don't run away. We normally take a picture, a set of pictures, one with the panelists and then one with everybody as a record of who was in the room. So Linda, over to you.
Huge thanks to all our participants this afternoon online. There were 100 plus, right, Jackie? Amazing. Thank you so much to all the participants. Thanks to the participants in the room. I think we can all testify it's been a very, very amazing session. The discussions have been useful. Clearly, the learning continues. The learning doesn't stop. There's been a lot of insights and strategies to go away with. The culture continues to grow. It is living and continues to form. Big, big thanks to our panelists this afternoon. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jackie, for leading the team this afternoon. Thanks to all our sponsors. Specific thanks, or should I say big, big thanks to ABI and Standard Chartered, who have invested in us this afternoon and continue to invest in us for the last 2 sessions now. Allow me to thank our partners as well, who have continued to, to drive the sessions. That's Legalmark, Stedman, JKC, and Covey. I'm not going to keep us any longer for today. I would like us to make time and join the photo session, as Jackie has said. My role was very simple. I appreciate you and appreciate the members that have taken, who have led the session this afternoon. And also to remind us that we shall have our final session for the year that is going to be coming out. More information is going to be coming out, but please look out for it because we want to wrap up the year with the BRMC style. Thank you so much. Please join us for tea. I don't know how we're going to do it for the online session. But the key thing for us is to network. We encourage each and every one of us to talk to somebody we don't know. Don't just take the business card, but please get the numbers and continue the conversations, how we can tap into each other's knowledge and continue with the culture that we're looking for within our boardrooms. Thank you so much and have a good evening.
Sign up, sign up, pull it on, take on a make everybody needs some kamane, katika nkulage how to make money. Simple, ngate digital, from just 20K, invest your money now, Vimbe. Cash up whenever you want your money, so deal just sign up, sign up, sign up, sign up.
Whatever your dream is, it could be yours. Just sign up for SC Shilingi from Standard Chartered Bank. Invest as low as 20,000 Uganda shillings and watch your money grow. Download the SC mobile app and start on your investment journey. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, please visit www.sc.com/UG or call us on 0200 52 44 100. Standard Chartered Bank. Here for good. Standard Chartered Bank Uganda Limited is regulated by Bank of Uganda. Customer deposits are protected by the Deposit Protection Fund of Uganda up to 10 million.
here, possibilities are everywhere. From taking first steps here, to beginning your own wealth journey here. From backing global trade ambitions here, to delivering on that promise here. From representing a team here, to empowering lives here, here, and here. That's why we're here on the ground. Here where you need us, in the world's most dynamic markets. A bank that connects potential to possibilities. So, where will you go from here?